And a very good afternoon, good morning, depending on what time zone you happen to be listening to us. We're coming to you live from the Eastern time zone, Charlotte, North Carolina, right here on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, as well as most of your podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We got it all. Thank you very much for listening. Just to let you know, we totally appreciate it. It's Friday. It's the end of the week as far as work is concerned. Of course, you got your last day today, and then you have the weekend off. Most people do. Some don't. Some people work on the weekend. Just all depends on your situation. But of course, we talk about this day. We refer to it as Fade the Public Friday. That's what today is. Fade the Public. What that means is whichever team the public is betting on, that's the one you kind of stay away from. So anyway, that's the story. Thanks again for listening. We appreciate you listening to the show right here, live from Charlotte, North Carolina. So today we have an interesting show. We're going to be, of course, bringing you up to date on some changes already. Some people talking about the Buccaneers possibly winning 17 games. Again, depending on who you listen to as far as your sports radio diet is concerned. Some say yes, some say no. Some coaches say it's almost impossible to get that far. One team did it, okay? Two teams actually went all the way. One went all the way, one went part of the way anyway. It's pretty tough, so, we'll see what happens. The important thing to remember is the lines are going to be high. Always remember that. When you got a team like that, you look at Kansas City being a contender. You look at the Buccaneers as being a contender. If you happen to be a fan of any of these two teams and you bet them because you are a fan, you're going to be laying some heavy points this season. There's no doubt about it, unless they get off to a slow start somewhere. But if not, it's going to be tough sledding as far as the favorite's concerned and the line and the betting line that's going to be coming out. You remember that with New England, all those years that they were 12, 13, 14, 15-point favorites. Many times they didn't cover. There's always a certain limit as to how far you can get out there. And, of course, that's something you might be dealing with this season long. So we're going to be talking about that. And as well as that, we got, of course, our 3 baseball games. We can't forget about baseball. We got 3 games on tap for today that we're going to take a closer look at. We're looking at the Phillies against the Blue Jays, the Rangers against the Astros, and of course the Cardinals against the Padres. We're going to take a look at the line movement in those games, kind of give you an idea as to which direction the pros are going as well. And also going to recap what happened last year as far as the underdogs were concerned in the NFL. Got a couple of emails yesterday from some listeners wanting to know how the system did last season in the NFL during the NFL season. So we're going to talk about that, bring you up to date on those kind of numbers as well. So in the meantime, as always, we talk about what happened the day before. And as far as that's concerned, we're looking at the NHL, the NBA, and of course, Major League Baseball. So in the National Hockey League, the Avalanche, a minus 500. Boy, you talk about laying some wood, laying out $500 to win 100. Now, they did win very easily. They beat the Kings 5-1. They now clinch the President's Cup, which means that they're the best team in the National Hockey League as far as records are concerned. They're the top playoff seed as well. So the Avalanche over here in Denver, Colorado, on top, winning the President's Cup, ready to roll. Meanwhile, the favorites went 2-0 yesterday, and it's nothing new. We've been talking about it before. The hockey situation has been such that the favorites have really dominated this season. But as you can see from some of the money line numbers, you really had to lay some wood in some instances if you're betting the National Hockey League games and betting the favorites, because they really dominated this season. Yesterday, like I said, they're 2-0. The Wild and the Blues closed as a pick'em. Now the overs went 2-1 yesterday, but the unders, they still hold that slim lead. They're at 50.7% as far as the unders are concerned. As far as first period overs, they went 2-1 yesterday, but the unders still lead. They're almost at 51%. Meanwhile, over in the NBA, the Suns outlasted the Blazers 118-117. And by doing that, they stay alive for that number one seed in the NBA. The Blazers could still land in the NBA play-in tourney as well. Now, the favorites went 9-0 straight up, but as usual, only 5-3-1 against the spread. You had a push on the Bucks at -9 against the Pacers. Meanwhile, the Spurs, they were 5-point dogs, and they beat the Knicks. The Kings, 8.5-point dogs against the Grizzlies. They covered, even though they did lose the games as well. The favorites moved up their lead up to 50.9, or almost 51% on the season. The unders went 7-1 yesterday. And once again, you had a push on the Raptors Bulls at 216. So the overs, their lead kind of came down a little bit, down to 50.3%. Meanwhile, in Major League Baseball, the favorites, they went 8-4. You had upsets by the Blue Jays, a +145 on the money line. The Rays were a +106. The Cardinals were a +124. And the Rockies were a +145. The favorites are now 301 on the plus side, 248 on the negative side, but they're still only at 54.8%. The unders went 8-3-1. You had a push on the A's Red Sox game at 9. So they increased their slim lead up to 51.6%. That's the story in Major League Baseball. So that covers baseball, the NBA, the National Hockey League as well. So it's time now, as usual. We're going to take our first break of the day. And when we come back, we're going to take a look at well, we have 3 games coming up as far as baseball is concerned, but we're going to be talking some football. So let's start out with a little football talk. Then we'll come in with the baseball games, and that's kind of going to be the way we're going to do things today. So just a reminder, you're in the sports wagering zone. And as usual, we do take 3 breaks during the show. The first one is of a minute duration. The other 2 are almost a minute or so also. So let you know, we'll be back into the zone in 1 minute. And welcome back. You're back in the sports wagering zone. I'm Chris Pardo. We're coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina. We're on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. You're on Blackjack TV over on the East Coast. And, of course, we're on milehighradio.com if you're interested in going in that direction as well. So let's talk about the baseball game. Let's get those out of the way, and then we can talk football and few little comments about the upcoming Preakness as well. So let's get started with the 3 games on tap for today. Take a look and see where the pro money where the line movement is going in these three games. The first game is around 7:30 tonight Eastern time. You got the Philadelphia Phillies 20-18 going up against the Toronto Blue Jays at 20-16. Now, both of these interleague teams come in on a real hot streak. The Phillies, they're 7-3 over their last 10 games, and they just took 2 out of 3 on the road against Washington. On the other side, the Jays, they just swept the Braves on the road, and they're now 6-2 over their last 8 games. So tonight's opener has this going for it. The Phillies come in with their righty Vince Velasquez. He's 1-0 so far this season with a 4.18 ERA. The Jays come back with their lefty Steven Matz. He's 5-2 with a 4.86 ERA. Now, as we look at the line, opened with Toronto as a moderate minus 130 home favorite. Phillies opened up as a plus 120 on the money line as a road dog. Now, the pro money has steamed the Jays. They drove Toronto up from minus 130 to minus 140 on the money line. Now, some of the shops, looking at them before we came on the air, are even up to 145 as well. So far this season, look at it this way. Teams in interleague play that have a line movement in their favor have gone 58.1%. Okay, so far this season, especially when there's interleague play, teams that receive a line movement in their favor are at 51.1%. The Jays are plus 34 in run differential. The Phillies are minus 5 so far this season. The Jays are 7-4 at home, and the Phillies are 7-12 on the road. We could also be looking at a higher scoring game tonight as well. The total opened at 10.5, which is kind of high as an open, and the over has been juiced up to minus 120, which means that that number of 10.5 may be moving up to 11 as well. The forecast calls for temperatures in the low 80s. Because they do play in Florida, they're not playing in Toronto. They are playing in Florida. All the Toronto home games are being played in Florida because of the COVID situation. You can't go traveling between countries without having a 14-day delay or things of that nature. So like I said, the forecast calls for low 80s, 10 to 15 mile per hour winds. And of course, the important thing is those winds will be blowing out from home plate to the outfield. One of the reasons why you've got such a high number and why it may even go even higher. So as far as this game is concerned, the pros are on the Toronto Blue Jays, and also they are on the over in this game as well. Meanwhile, at 8 o'clock, you have the battle for Texas. The Texas Rangers, 18-21. Up against the Houston Astros that are 21-17. The Astros snuck by the Rangers, 4-3 in 11 innings last night, cashed in as a minus 200 on the money line as a home favorite. Now, the Rangers have now dropped 3 straight games. The Astros have now won 3 straight. In tonight's rematch, the Rangers sent out their lefty, Wes Benjamin. He's 0-1 this season with a 4.76 ERA. The Astros come back with their veteran righty, Zach Greinke. He's 2-1 with a 4.23 ERA. Now, looking at this line, it opened with Houston minus 200 as an opening as a home favorite. Texas is at plus 180 as a road dog on the money line. Now, I know it's high to start off with at minus 200, but despite that expensive opening, the pros do like Houston in this game, and they've steamed that number up from 200 up to minus 220 on the money line. Now, teams coming off of a win that have 15 cents of steam or more have gone 58% this season. The Astros fit that category. Over 200, is over 15 cents in move. You look at a 58% average so far this season. Now, the big favorites at minus 200 or more, if they're coming off a win, like the Astros are doing, they're at 72% so far this season. The Rangers are just 6-16 against right-handed starting pitchers. Houston is a plus 45 in run differential. The Rangers in this situation are minus 9. Houston is 12-9 at home. Texas 9-11 on the road. The Astros are 10-10 against lefties so far this season, but they've gone 54% against lefties since 2018. So there's a little plus factor for them as well. So in this game between the Rangers and the Astros, the battle for Texas taking place in Houston, the pros are on Houston in this particular game, even though if you do like them, you're going to have to lay some heavy wood. Meanwhile, at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, St. Louis Cardinals, 23-15, traveling down to San Diego, 21-17 for the Padres. Now, this is a non-divisional game. You got two of the top four teams in the National League playing against each other. The Cardinals lead the National League Central. They just took 2 out of 3 from Milwaukee. St. Louis, they're now 5-1 over their last 6 games. Now, for the Padres, they're second in the National League West. They're just behind the Giants, and they just took 2 out of 3 at home from the Rockies. In tonight's series opener, the Cardinals start their righty, Johan Oviedo. He's 0-1 this season with a 4.61 ERA. The Padres come out with their righty, Joe Musgrove. He's 2-4 this season with a 3 ERA. Looking at the line in this game, it opened with the Padres listed as a minus 150 home favorite on the money line. The Cardinals opened as a plus 140 as a road dog. Now, in this particular game, the public is kind of split. They don't know who to back. But the pros, they always seem to have their minds always made up. And they're leaning to the Padres because we've seen San Diego move from minus 150 up to minus 165 on the money line. Now, remember this. Teams, again, receiving 10 cents of steam or more in a non-division game, which this is, are at 61% so far this season. Now, the sweet spot non-division favorites between minus 150 and minus 175, they're at 64% this season. The Padres also have value because they're a favorite with a low total. The fewer expected runs scored, that's why the total is low. They are more likely to come from the better team. Always keep that in mind. Whenever you have a low total, it favors the better team, or the way you look at it from that perspective, the team with the better record at home and away, whatever the situation happens to be. Now, San Diego, they also have a one-day rest advantage because they played on Wednesday. The Cardinals played yesterday. So the 10 o'clock game, the late game tonight, the Cardinals against the Padres. The pros are on the San Diego Padres. So looking at the 3 games on tap for tonight, Philadelphia against Toronto, the pros are on Toronto. If you like Toronto or you're thinking of betting this game, get ready to lay a lot of wood. Houston against the Rangers, pros are on Houston in this game. And finally, the 10 o'clock game, the pros are on San Diego against the St. Louis Cardinals. So that's the story as far as those games are concerned for tonight. Just to let you know how the system has been doing so far, kind of keep you up to date on that. Yesterday, we had 3 plays, and yesterday we had a losing day. It's the first losing day over the past 5 days, in other words. We had 1 winner. We had the Cardinals over the Brewers. We had the A's against the Red Sox and lost that one. Picked the Yankees against the Rays because you know what happened there. The Rays really blew them away. So yesterday we had 3 plays. We had 1 winner and 2 losers. How does that stack up for the whole season? Well, so far we had 116 plays. We had 64 wins, 51 losses. That puts you at a very hefty 55.1%. 55.1%. That's the story as far as that little system is concerned. And of course, like we mentioned earlier, Friday is often called Fade the Public Friday, especially amongst people that bet a lot of baseball. And there's a reason for that. Because, historically, today's the best day of the week to bet against the public. Because the casual bettors, the recreational bettors, the guys that don't play baseball every day, okay, are finishing their work Friday, looking for a little action, and they generally start to bet on Fridays. They come in, and what happens is they come in, they play the favorites. Of course, they play favorites. They play home teams. They like the popular teams. They like winning teams and teams with star players. And usually one of the more better starting pitchers as well. So this creates a perfect storm if you're a value-minded contrarian, so you can take advantage of these underpriced lines. So the idea is that today, it's Friday. I know so far as the pros are concerned, they seem to like all the favorites in these games today. But, we are here at the show, we're primarily contrarians. We're kind of going that direction. So we kind of have mixed emotions about today, but we are keeping a record of these plays as far as the pros and which direction they're going, because that happens to be the system. So we tell you what they are. We don't have a dog in this fight, as they say. We just give you the stats, we give you the information, and leave it up to you to decide which way to go. So that's the story on baseball. Let's take our second break. We come back, we'll be talking football. We'll take a look and see some early line movements in some of the games, as well as want to review some of the stats from the year before, kind of give you an idea as to how well this underdog system has been working so far. Anyway, thanks for listening. And just a reminder, we will be back in the zone in about 60 seconds. And welcome back. You're back in the sports wagering zone on this Friday, the end of the week. We're coming to you live, and of course, we're here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, as well as podcasting on most of your major podcast platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google. We're on most of them, so easy to get a hold of us. And really, to get a hold of us, if you want to get in touch with us, very simple. Just send an email. Send it to the Sports Wagering Zone at gmail.com. That's the Sports Wagering Zone at gmail.com. So we talked about baseball. That's done with now for the time being. Let's get to football because it's still getting some repercussions after yesterday. But, the biggest takeaway from yesterday's what we call schedule day is the easy regular season path for the defending Super Bowl champions. There's no doubt about it. The Bucs, they got the fourth easiest schedule in 2021 because it's based on the records of the teams they're playing last season, okay, against the win percentage. So the Bucs have a real unrivaled stability. They're becoming one of the rare defending champs to return all their starters, all 22 starters, first time ever in the NFL from the Super Bowl. Tampa Bay will also have Tom Brady coming into his second season with the team, okay? Haven't had 1 year under his belt with them, getting his timing down. And he's much more comfortable right now. He's comfortable with the system, and he's comfortable with where he's at. So to paint an even rosier picture for the Bucs, they're going to be facing two of the weakest divisions in the NFL as well. The NFC South, okay, because they're in that division. And, of course, they're going to be facing the teams in the NFC East. Now, why does this matter if you're a bettor? Because the Bucs season's win total is 11.5. The over is juiced up to a minus 120. Now, those numbers are from BetMGM, by the way, okay? Might be a little different from where you are. So what this means is there's some liability and the pro money on the over 11.5 because of the things we just talked about. There's a possible rise to 12 in the coming months just before the season actually starts. So if you do like the Bucs and you like them at 11.5, now's the time to start getting in. Otherwise, there's a good possibility it'll go to 12. So it's up to you. Think about it, but those are some of the things that are going on. These are the things that you should be looking into. Now, the hardest games would likely be against when they play the Rams, when they play the Patriots, the Colts, and the Bills. Those should be one of their tougher games this season. Maybe the Bucs will split with the Saints. But even if Tampa loses all 5 of these games, they're still 12-5. Remember, there's 17 games this season. Now, for these reasons, the over of 11.5 seems like is a good possibility it may come. Now, of course, that's the story there. We leave it up to you to decide which way you want to go. If you think that 11.5 is not going to go any higher than that, stay where you are, sit back and relax, and wait a little bit longer if you want to. But if you think you're getting close to that borderline situation there, may not be a bad idea to start getting involved. In the meantime, let's take a look at what happened last season. Got a couple of emails from some of the listeners wanting to know how the underdog system, which we utilize and do throughout the season in the NFL, how it did last year. Now, keep in mind that last year, because of COVID, the way the schedule was being run, sometimes the team played in the middle of the week. Sometimes there was a shorter rest period. Sometimes there was a longer rest period. So from a betting standpoint, it was probably a lot tougher last season as far as betting and trying to select winners and losers compared to other seasons where you kind of run through the same thing. You'll have a little difference this year now because you have 17 games into play now. One more game is coming into the situation. So it kind of alters things a little bit from a mathematical standpoint. We're strictly analytical here at the show, okay? Not much paying attention to who's a quarterback, who's going here, who's going there. It's strictly a numbers situation. The numbers that we look at are the underdogs. Now, here's what happened last season. Now, just for a moment, even going into the last game during the regular season last season, the dogs were 9-7 against the spread. So for the whole season, through 256 games, the dogs went 137, 111, and 3 with pick'ems on 5 games. That comes out to a percentage of 55.2%, which means that if arbitrarily from the first day, that first Thursday night game, if you just bet the underdogs, regardless of what the story was, whoever they were playing against. And I remember going through last season with this. And of course, being a diehard Giant fan, I don't bet on the Giants because I'm a fan, okay? But they came up with numbers last year. I used to tell people because of they were dogs and they were favored in these games as far as the dog was concerned, you know, I wouldn't bet this game. There were games that they played that I wouldn't have bet even if I was going to bet. And yet they wound up covering. Maybe they didn't win, but they did cover. You've seen that happen a few times. Who would have figured that the Vegas team would have beaten Kansas City? There's no way on earth you could sit down and figure out that to bet on the Vegas Raiders instead of Kansas City in that game. And yet it all came out that way. So for the whole season, a 55.2% average. 52.3 is what you have to do to be breaking even. So from that standpoint, it was a profitable way. But there were some dog games within the system that even did better than that. So here are the top dog systems from last year, just to give you an idea. If you bet just divisional dogs, okay, now we're slimming down. Instead of betting, 200 some odd games, here we're dropping it down a little bit. So just by betting a divisional dog, they were 55-41 against the spread. That's 57%, over 57%, 57.3 to be exact. Now, if you take dogs with a line movement in their favor, okay, they were 62-42. That was 59.6%. Meanwhile, the short road dogs, which means they were 6-point dogs or less, they were at 60.7%. And of course, the best of all and had the least amount of bets you had to make were the primetime dogs. We're talking about Sunday late night game, the Monday night game, or a Thursday night game when they came up as well. Those primetime dogs, there were only 51 bets that in that situation. They were 31-20, which is 60.8%. No matter how you look at them, okay, they were a profit no matter which way you looked at it last season. Now, the overs went 10-6, and they wound up finishing at 126 and 125 for the season. And let's take a look at the most profitable teams for 2020. The most profitable teams to bet on last season. The Bills, 11-5 against the spread. The Dolphins, 11-5. The Steelers, 10-6, as well as the Ravens at 10-6. Okay, those were the most profitable teams to bet on last season. Those are some of the stats that we're able to put together for you. Also, now, as far as the least profitable teams, looking at those is the Cowboys, 5-11. Go figure, right? Before the season, no one ever would have thought that's what it would have been. The Vikings were 6-10 against the spread. Texans were 6-10. The Browns were 6-10. The Jets were 6-10 against the spread. The Eagles were 6-10. So those were the worst teams against the spread. Now, the best over teams were the Titans. They were 12-3. The Raiders were 12-3. The Vikings were 11-4. The Bills were 10-4. The Cowboys were very good to the over, okay, at 10-6. The Lions were at 10-6. Now, the best under teams go the other way. The Giants, 12-3 to the under. The Rams were 12-4. The Cardinals were 11-5. The Patriots were 10-5, as well as Washington being 10-5. So those are the stats from last season. Now, I'm working on trying to get the stats from the season before, try to compare them so you'll have a season where it was a normal season. Last season was not a normal season from any stretch of the imagination as far as the way the league was going, primarily, again, because of the COVID situation. So those are the type of statistics we want to keep you up to date on. let you know what's going on. But again, if we just talk about them on the air like we just did, you hear them, you kind of absorb them for a few minutes, and then after a while you forget about them. You can't remember them. That's where having the newsletter will really come in handy, because these are the type of stats that you'll have in a printed form emailed to you. Okay, so you can always refer to it. You file it in your email files. If you want to go back and look at it, just check on something, it'll be there for you, because you can't possibly memorize all these stats that we give you. And there's a lot more to go. I have a ton of stats on baseball that if I started giving you the statistics on them, you'd fall asleep by halfway through them, and you wouldn't remember half of them the next day anyway. So if you are interested, because we really think that this is a good way to try to help you out, is if you're interested in that newsletter, just let us know, because we need to know that we have enough people interested in it. Otherwise, why do it? Okay, it's extra work for us here. Be more than happy to do it, but of course, we want to make sure that enough people are getting to use the information. So just send us an email. Send it to the Sports Wagering Zone at gmail.com. That's the Sports Wagering Zone at gmail.com. Doesn't have to be a long letter. Just say, yes, I'm interested. We'll get in touch with you later on as we start getting closer and closer to putting this whole situation together. So in addition to just getting the early line numbers before the show comes on, okay, which will be of some help to you if you're looking to bet baseball, for instance, because a lot of games do start in the afternoon. Some of them start right after the show just starts or ends, okay? So you'll have that type of information, plus all the statistical data that will be there to try to help make you a better handicapper. The better you get, the better you'll do at the cash line when you go to cash in them tickets. So that's the story there. Once again, just send us an email, the Sports Wagering Zone at gmail.com. Be more than happy to kind of take it from there. So let's take our final break, get it out of the way. I want to have some commentary on the Preakness coming up this coming Saturday, as well as talking about just, cheating in general, what's been happening over the years and how everyone has kind of reacted to it. You're going to be kind of surprised to hear what that's all about. So let's take that final break. And just a reminder, we'll be back into the Sports Wagering Zone right after this message. And welcome back. You're back in the Sports Wagering Zone. I'm Chris Pardo. Thank you very much for listening. Coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. The Preakness is coming up, and usually, horse racing gets a real boost as far as publicity is concerned, usually around this time of the year, because most people, even though they're not regular bettors, they try to figure out whether the Kentucky Derby winner is going to be able to win the Triple Crown. So you have your winner, now you have the Preakness, and then, of course, you have the Belmont Stakes. Of course, the narrative for this Preakness this Saturday has really changed ever since Bob Baffert announced the Medina Spirit had tested positive for the anti-inflammatory drug betamethasone. Okay. Now, the backlash when this came out was really big. Okay, especially in regard to whether Baffert is really the greatest trainer of all time because of his record. He had 7 Derby wins. Okay, did he do it as a cheater? That was a question that was being thrown out there. The integrity of horse racing in general has also been called into question. There's always criticism, drug testing protocols on both extremes. But some say that any violation calls for a suspension, while others say, the rules are too strict right now for anybody. Everybody would be suspended because the rules are so strict as far as that's concerned. Now, I'm not a pharmacist or a lawyer, so I'm content to let everything kind of run its course, the due process, of course. Now, I like to bet, and sports betting is my life to a degree because I do the show. So my focus is on the implications of what happens in betting. Of course, the biggest complaints that I've been hearing about have been coming from those people who bet the Derby and they bet on Mandaloun, who was the runner-up. They feel that they should get paid, right? Now, I spent a lot of time this week talking to people saying, hey, you're out of luck. The results are in, they become official. And for wagering purposes, it's official on race day. You can't go back, and people are not going to come back with their tickets and hand them in, okay? That's not going to change even if the Kentucky Racing Commission disqualifies Medina Spirit and declares Mandaloun the winner. It's not going to make any difference. Forget about it. Stop moaning and groaning. It's done. It happens. And most of the complaints have really come from, the recreational bettors, the novice bettors, especially the guys who only bet on horse racing at Derby time. Otherwise, they haven't got the foggiest notion what's going on. Longtime gamblers know that this happens in other sports when championships are vacated after the fact is done. It's always been that way. The bookies pay out winning tickets on the given day or after a season when you're doing futures bets or game, how many games are going to be won. And they're not about to then also pay those who had the rightful winner, especially since they're not able to recoup the money from the initial payout. So that's the story. They're not going to pay it out. Now, some people are arguing that this has to change. Now, I know it's a noble concept. There's no doubt about it. And maybe that will be the case someday when we really electronically can do it, when all bets are done and we can reverse them easily. But that's not the world we live in right now. The more frustrating thing that I've been hearing lately is all the people who say we should boycott horse racing because of all the cheating and all the unfair gambling outcomes. That's what you hear. And I understand that frustration. I've been there. But I don't believe any of us are going to be able to do that. It's impossible. And I saw this from experience. We've heard similar boycotts discussed for many, many years in various different sports. Did anyone stop betting on the NFL when the Spygate came out, or Deflategate, whatever you want to call them? What about all the steroid scandals in baseball? The Astros cheating scandal? College sports have had a ton of game-fixing games. And how about the Tim Donaghy scandal in the NBA? And let's not even get into all the controversial judging decisions, for instance, in boxing or MMA. Yet, you know what? We all can't wait to bet the next big fight, the next big game. I know it stinks when these things happen, but despite there being a lot of these examples of what's happened in the past, there's still a really small percentage of all the games that are being played. So you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, as they say. So after all the dust is going to settle, and it will, I'll still be handicapping the Preakness. I'll be talking about the plays in baseball, in football, in basketball and hockey, or whatever it is. We might need to factor which trainers are cheating into our handicapping methods. But how is that different from any other sport? Are any batters using steroids or pitchers scuffing up the ball? Okay. Are there college football and basketball coaches that are bending the rules? It goes on all the time. So here's the whole story. The bottom line is this. Forget about all that. It's going to happen. And if you let it bother you, it's just going to drive you crazy. What you got to do is this. You handicap to your best ability. You trust that most of the time you're going to be on the right side of whatever it is that you're picking. So that's the word for today. That's the story. Don't worry about it. It goes on. It's going to go on. You just got to hope that, hey, some people profit from it. Okay. There's always some people that went the other way, just happen to have the team that was cheating. It happens that way. So you just have to do the best you can. And if it does happen, you hope that you're on that side as well. So that's the story as far as that's concerned. That's where I feel about it. I'm sure most of you just sit down and think about it, you're going to feel the same way. So once again, getting back to baseball, we talked about that all day. Tonight, 3 games on tap. These are the pros. This is what they like. Philadelphia Phillies against the Toronto Blue Jays. Again, like I said, if you like the Blue Jays, get ready to lay a lot of wood. The pros like the Jays in this game. The battle for Texas with the Rangers and the Astros, those cheating Astros as they're called, they're going to be betting really high. The pros are on Houston as well. And the late game, you got the Cardinals against the San Diego Padres. And in that particular game, the pros are on the Padres as well. So that's the story for today. Once again, I want to thank you very much for listening. Had a great time. We're here every day, Monday through Friday, 12 noon Eastern time. Tomorrow, Saturday. On Saturday and Sunday, we're on at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So that's the story for tomorrow. We told you about today, brought you up to date on some stats as how the dog systems worked last season. See how they do this season. We'll be watching it real close. And if you're interested in the newsletter, send us an email. Let us know that you care. Anyway, that's the story. Have a wonderful Friday. If you don't listen on the weekend, I hope you have a great weekend. And if you're going to be betting tonight or this weekend, I hope you have a profitable weekend as well. So until tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time, I'm Chris Pardo. We're coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina, and we will be on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, as well as most of your basic platforms for podcasting. So until tomorrow, have a great Friday, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody.